Okay. So, my humble greetings to one and all who are here to participate in our Morung Dialogue this evening. I take the honor and privilege to welcome each and everyone who are going to be in the Morung Dialogue for today. And I know the program has been organized by the Naga People's Movement for Human Rights in Delhi. We are fortunate to have two persons who have a lot of experience and knowledge in the Indigenous Peoples Movement. And I thought we will have the program scheduled in such a way that me chairing the Morung Dialogue could give a opening remark, followed by the panelists. Each of the panelists, we could probably give them 10 minutes to give their presentation, after which this will be followed by a 15 minutes discussions. And then we come to the concluding session by giving 3 to 4 minutes for each of the panelists to give their concluding remark. And I think with that, we could probably use our time fruitfully and close the session. Or if there is something that comes up about making some strategies for a way forward, I think we can leave it as we progress along the program. Now, to start with, I thought maybe
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Dr. Ngully, but if you can speak closer to the mic, that would help all of us. Yeah, you're not so loud. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Please let me know when I'm not loud or yeah. So anyway, as an opening remark, I just remembered something from my childhood days. Our parents or our elders, they used to speak about in our village that if we as a people or as a Naga, if we are not careful and if we don't defend and protect our freedom, our dignity and humanity, at the end times or a time may come where we will be transformed into miniature tiny creatures, who will be climbing chili trees and brinjal trees. I don't know at what stage of our journey, and if at all, what they have prophesied is coming near about, I do not know. But maybe giving that as an indigenous story, which I heard from my childhood, I thought we could start off with our first panelist. And for the first panelist, I would like to invite Mr. Ghazali Ohorella. As we all know, Mr. Ghazali Ohorella has a vision for Moluku to emerge as an indigenous nation built on the Alifuru heritage with a governance structure made of traditional elders and leaders with services like education, healthcare, etc. that respect and embrace the Alifuru way of life. As a product of the indigenous Alifuru people and an idealist with 18 years of experience advocating for the rights of indigenous peoples at the United Nations, Ghazali's why is to inspire and empower indigenous peoples so that they can do what inspires them. Ghazali is an endembulo and often described by friends as a machine, working to open up spaces and to provide tools for indigenous peoples. In doing so, he has worked with many indigenous movements, organizations, governments, NGOs, and state representatives around the world. Ghazali co-authored co-chaired a UN General Assembly session during the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples in 2014 and addressed the United Nations General Assembly in 2017, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples. Ghazali is also a trainer in a number of programs on the rights of indigenous peoples and serve as the representative for indigenous peoples in the negotiations on the UNFCCC, local communities and indigenous peoples platform on traditional knowledge. Ghazali is a board member of the Drumbeat Media, an NGO that produces videos and documentaries for and of indigenous peoples around the globe. Ghazali is the host of Gomoluku, a podcast in which he documents his process and talks with indigenous peoples representatives on a wide range of topics, including their thoughts, failures, the lessons they have learned, the heart and their aha moments, and the sacrifices they made to claim their rights. Ladies and gentlemen, I present Mr. Ghazali.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. It was such an honor and a privilege to address the Naga people on the commemoration of the Independence Day. So I was quite honored to be asked to back and unpack a little bit my message that I gave on that day, and also like seeing a very distinguished panel. I see Gam already. Gam is as a Secretary General of the AIPP, like worked a lot with him, and if you do not pay attention to me, do definitely pay attention to him, because he's amazing in what he does. I already recognize that I only have 10 minutes. So I will jump right into it. But the question was to unpack a little bit the right to self-determination, which is very important to indigenous peoples. In my personal context, I'm from Maluku. We were colonized by the Dutch for over 300 years. If you don't know where Maluku is, it is between Australia and the Philippines, 999 islands, 2 million indigenous peoples still living on the islands. And we have a community of approximately 50,000 living in Holland. And we were supposed to be decolonized after Dutch left, but Sukarno, he intervened the decolonization process while we declared ourselves independent. We had the option to become independent. We chose for independence right before Sukarno started invading all the islands and created a Republic of Indonesia, and the rest is history. So up until this point, we are an occupied nation. We declared ourselves independent on April 25th, 1950. So, and we were still fighting to regain our independence until this day. And proclaiming our independence is an act of self-determination. It is the choice of the people, which is a virtue of all peoples. The right to self-determination is, for example, if you look at the international law or at the United Nations, the UN Charter says we the peoples. So not we the nations, but we the peoples. And it includes that all peoples have the right to self-determination. The Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 3, says that indigenous peoples provides that indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination. And you have many more conventions, for example, like the International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as well as the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. They both have the same first article, and which is the article the right to self-determination. So self-determination is the pinnacle, if in my own words, from this one man's point of view, of people's right that they can have. It is the exact opposite of decolonization. Mind you, like the United Nations was created after World War II, and also that and you saw that there was a decolonization movement emerging in Asia, in Africa, like all around the world. So the opposite of colonization, is self-determination. So all peoples have the right to self-determination, and so which makes it very important that we as indigenous peoples keep enforcing it. Claiming the right to self-determination. The Naga people as well, like it is very important because you are a people distinct. You have your own culture, you have your own land, you have a language that binds you, a common heritage, a common history, which describes you as a peoples. If a country says, well, the Naga peoples are not peoples, like it is not up to them to decide if you are peoples or not. It is up to the Naga people to decide whether you are a peoples. And that is also a part of the right to self-determination, to determine that you are a peoples, to identify yourself as an individual, that you are part of a peoples. So that right has been very important in the work of indigenous peoples all around the world, not just in Asia, Pacific, where I am from, or Arctic, or North America, Latin America, and Caribbean, and Russia, and Africa. It is everywhere. What indigenous people all around the world are trying to do is to claim our right to self-determination, and making sure that, to address all the historical grievances that have been occurring in the past, and making sure that we can survive and thrive as a peoples for the next 7 generations. We're not looking at making things better for tomorrow. We're looking at making things better for the next seven generations, making sure that our grandchildren's grandchildren can still say that I'm Naga, live on Naga land, and I am proud to be a Naga. That is the essence of continuously claiming the right to self-determination. So that right has a very strong foundation in the movement around the world. Indigenous peoples look at the Sustainable Development Goals. Those are what indigenous peoples are trying to make sure that indigenous peoples are included and that our rights are respected. If you look at traditional knowledge, biodiversity, climate change, it has a whole breadth, a whole host of issues that indigenous peoples are facing, that we, as a fundamental basis, are trying to bring in our rights, which includes the right to self-determination. One of the challenges is from an indigenous people's point of view, is that indigenous peoples at one side want to elevate or bring at the table for discussion, or not discussion, but making sure that self-determination is continuously on the table, that our right to self-determination is respected. On the other hand, you see and this is a trend that I am seeing, and maybe Gam can comment on this as well, is that NGOs or conservation organizations and states as well, they bring up free, prior, and informed consent, which is also part of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But it is very important that we keep on emphasizing the right to self-determination, because the free, prior, and informed consent is a product of self-determination. It is an iteration not an iteration, but it is like the lowest common denominator that was included in the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And you see that that more and more are focusing on free, prior, and informed consent. The problem with that is that it goes away. What we're seeing right now, it goes away from the right to self-determination. So it is very important that in these peoples right now, that we keep either that we bring free, prior, and informed consent back to the very core, what it's meant to be, close to the right to self-determination, or that we bring up the discussion on the right to self-determination. Because that is, you have a lot of political movements. The Naga people are not alone in the world. The Naga peoples are not the only ones that are want to be independent. There are many more Indigenous peoples that want to be self-governing, autonomous, or independent, or have a form of sovereignty. So it is very important that we, as Indigenous peoples all around the world, make sure that the right to self-determination is is being discussed, is back on the discussion table, that we can talk about, for example, the Naga people claiming the right to self-determination, and how can a country that is the oppressor or the colonists, or whoever you want to call it, that they respect the right to self-determination, they respect the will of the people, the will of the Naga people. So that is why it is, the right to self-determination is very important for Indigenous peoples. It is a right that we should have had all along. The Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, 46 articles, they're not new rights. That's what a lot of states will say, that, well, we're not here to create new rights for you. Acknowledging the rights of Indigenous peoples, we don't want to create new for you. What it is important to understand is that the rights of Indigenous peoples are derived from existing human rights, from individual rights, and just the only difference is that the rights of Indigenous peoples are collective rights, because we're talking about peoples, and that these rights are not new, and that these are just rights that we should have had all along, and we're just trying to keep up, or not keep up, but like get back to the respect that we have as the peoples. So one final thing that I would like to share is also on the right to self-determination, is that it is in constant development. We are, as Indigenous peoples all around the world, we are trying to bring that back to the table, having discussion, dialogues around it. You see it emerging. For example, this forum is perfect because you start with the basis. You start with the right to self-determination. You start with something that is very important to all peoples. It's the will of the peoples, what the peoples want. So, and I think like this is a conversation that should be, and I think that's the quote unquote the positive things of COVID-19, and I'm sure that not a lot of people will agree with me, but having these forums, like virtual forums, we can start having dialogues, not just in a Naga context, but in an Asia context, but in a global context, looking at, all right, right to self-determination. What is it? What is it to you? What is it to you? What is it to people in Russia? What is it to people in Africa? So that we can unpack it together, and making sure that self-determination all around the world is being put on a table, is part of the agenda, and that we, once this whole COVID-19 is over, and we can meet in person, we can go to the United Nations, because right now, I'm supposed to be in many countries right now, but it feels like I'm grounded. That we can meet and have a frank, open and frank discussion, because we already have strategized to have discussions on it. We're on an equal level with each other on like what we understand as the right to self-determination is, or what our rights of Indigenous peoples are. And that is one of the things of self-determination that I love. It is that wherever you go, it is the basis of everything for Indigenous peoples. The self-identification, the right to represent yourselves in meetings, and it goes from that to also the right to eating your own food, having your own religion, being able to educate your own language in your schools, being able to educate your own history in schools. That is also the right to self-determination. So it is not just the national aspiration of independence, for example, in the Naga context, but it is also to really being able to transmit the Naga heritage, the Naga territories for the next 7, 8, 9, 10 generations, and you can only do that hopefully in a if you do claim the right to self-determination. So I could talk for hours and days about the right to self-determination, but I'm trying to capture within 10 minutes But I'm definitely keen to yeah, listening, and also like if there are any questions that I can yeah, provide practical advice or ideas that can help the Naga movement, making yeah, being more being able to more claim the right to self-determination in a more substantial way. Thank you so much for, I think I'm at 10 minutes now. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Dr. Ngully, please unmute.
Yeah. So am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes,
Yeah.
you are.
I would like to thank Mr. Ghazali for sharing with us about the right to self-determination. And when he says so, I was just thinking in my mind that for indigenous Naga people, self-determination seems to come just naturally, you know, because in our traditional villages, we have always had a right to determine our own self. So even before the world came to start using the word like self-determination, I think Nagas in their own way, in their own village context, were already in that having that self-determination to ourselves. Anyway, we'll go on to the next panelist, that is Mr. A.Shimray. He's a Naga and he's a devoted human rights activist for almost 30 years. He has held important positions and was part of several civil and democratic rights initiatives. As a current Secretary General of the Indigenous Peoples Pact, he ambitions to contribute to advancing the pursuit of indigenous peoples' rights and deepening of democracy in Asia. He has good knowledge and takes keen interest on issues of biodiversity, indigenous knowledge, and self-determination. He has also involved in peace-building initiatives in India and has authored some publications relating to human rights, environment, and ethnic issues. I give the time to Gam now.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you, Dr. Ngully. And also thanks a lot to Ghazali for making my task easier and unpacking the importance of self-determination. I think that was very clear, and definitely I also subscribe to the fact that for indigenous people, self-determination is the beginning to begin to exercise and enjoy our human rights. And that self-determination is a social necessity, because it is without that political space, we cannot exercise our cultural rights, diversity, education, and all kinds of beliefs that we have with our land, territories, and resources, and so on. So thank you very much, Ghazali, at the outset. Now I am asked to cover on the Naga story in the indigenous movement. And I was thinking how to do this, and I think I will cover this basing on one simple point. And that is that our ancestors did not believe in power struggle, but our ancestors deeply believed in reconciliation. And I would like to give some story in relation to this reconciliatory approach that our ancestors chose to do so when it comes to the outside world. So we start seeing this at the time of the British. They came, we tried to reconcile with the British, and somewhat we achieved this in a temporary sense, in the sense that the British were also happy to leave us as we were, as long as we gave our allegiance and loyalty to them. So that was the sort of an ad hoc arrangement. So out of these, that the Nagas joined as the labor corps group in the First World War. But exposure to this First World War, Nagas elders, our ancestors, saw that the world was deeply entrenched in power struggle and to control over one another. So this gave them new insights as to how the world was progressing and how the world was deeply entrenched in the struggle. So this resulted in what we always referred to as a Simon Commission, submission to the Simon Commission, making it clear that nationhood cannot be there between peoples who have no shared cultures and beliefs. And now our ancestors were not academicians or theoreticians, but it came exactly to what John Stuart Mill was saying when he was defining the concept of nationalities, where he said that free institutions are next to impossible in a country made up of different nationalities. Now, of course, we have progressed, and there are many methods to do this, but in essence, and the intent of what Mill was saying remains true till today. So this was a British time. Now, coming to the Indian era, as we know that India took over and there was military conflict and many human rights abuses and violations that occurred in our history. And therefore, Naga would refer to the Indians as our enemy, the enemy. But nevertheless, some of our elders always saw the necessity to reconcile with the people of India because they believed that we must make friends with the enemy. And I think there was deep vision in this. It is for this reason that in the early 70s, the Naga elders, who were students at that time in New Delhi, they took part in the struggles of the marginalized societies or sections of the Indian society. And they identified with their pains and sufferings. And further, they took active role in responding to the first ever heavy repression that came as a fallout of the declaration of emergency during the Indira Gandhi period. Now, this was an eye-opener for Indian civil society and their leaders. Because at that point of time, as I said, Nagas generally viewed India as the enemy. And then the Indians perceived us as the savages coming from the deep, dark jungles of the frontier areas. So this was a breakthrough. Friendship developed. And that's also how the Naga People's Movement for Human Rights was born in 1978. And then our elders continued to make peace and make friends in India, and that friendship and alliance grew. And we see till today some of those friends who are still committed to the rights of the Naga people. Now, from there, we began to reach out more to the indigenous movements across Asia. And that is how the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, where I'm working now, was established in 1992. So in 93, two indigenous leaders from Asia were invited to the Vienna World Conference, which is a landmark still today in the international processes. And we were invited not just to give a statement, but to speak to the international audience for the first time. And that's why it was a landmark there. And the process for where therefore our elders participated in the negotiation on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Now, why this UN Declaration is important. The context is also that at the time, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights was strongly pitched on the idea of individual rights centered on the contribution made by the Western civilization. Therefore, some saw that there was a competing priority between individual rights and collective rights. And also that some peoples were excluded from this right to self-determination because the predominant narrative at that time was that they were applying the principle of the saltwater theory, meaning that it applies to colonies across the ocean. Now, therefore, why this is so significant is that UNDRIP resolves two things. It has been adopted and it has yielded the fruit of the effort that was made by the indigenous elders. That is, UNDRIP makes it very clear that there is no disharmony between individual and collective rights. Rather, these are mutually supportive to one another. This was a major contribution of indigenous vision and leadership role. The second one was that this led to some sort of a moral reform in the international human rights standards. And that is to say that it became more inclusive by including indigenous peoples outrightly in a succinct way that we have the right to self-determination. And I think the door still continues to be open for further reform, where other peoples can still be included in more explicit way. So this is the contribution. Now this contribution comes from the fact that our elders believe that we must reconcile at the global scale as well in order to reduce conflict, violence, and bloodshed across the world. So this is a deep belief that we had as indigenous elders. Now then, when the ceasefire came in the Naga context, some of you were already there, some of you may not be aware because you were too young or something. But we initiated what was called the journey of conscience. If I remember correctly, it was in 2002, to speak to the people of India, to say that we are here to reconcile. We can no longer or continue to keep on fighting. We are for peace, we are for justice. We need a new vision. We cannot continue, that was the message. And we reach out to different parts of the country, including our neighboring communities in Northeast India. No? Now, the good thing was, of course, the Indian civil society also reciprocated, and therefore it was somewhere around 2002 or something that they came to Kohima to talk to the Naga people, that they were sorry for what was happening and what the military did to the Naga people, and that the reconciliation should happen through an honorable long-term political settlement between India and the Nagas was the message, for which we are proud. But of course, our journey is always not so smooth. There were disruption, and our journey remains incomplete today, right? So now I just want to touch upon about our contribution as a Naga is that why did our forebears believe so profoundly in reconciliation? It's because without a reconciliatory approach to life, there can be no peace, justice, bonding and love. And for this, that is why they saw the need for the supreme order, because we believe in the Creator. And the natural order and the human order to be in harmony. And this was acted out in sacredness at the founding of every Naga villages. This was common. Those of you who knows how a Naga village is founded will understand what I'm trying to say, but I have no time to get into that. Now, what these demonstrate is that they possessed all the prerequisites for setting up free institutions. Now, free institutions, I'm referring to what J.S. Mill was talking about. Because free institutions must be based on consensual order that is moral. And consensual means every individual is counted as free individuals, where there is equal reciprocal rights and duties. These reciprocal rights and duties shapes and gives meaning to the self and the collective selfhood based on strong moral grounding that the UN DRIP is talking about, and that there is no tension between these two. Rather, it makes it more complete. It is for this reason that our forebears have cherished and enjoyed their village institutions in the form of village republic, which Dr. Ngully was mentioning, for thousands of years. And in this village, our elders always emphasized humility, integrity, and reconciliation, because it is only through radical humility that makes us realize our ignorance and gain true wisdom. Because without realizing our ignorance, we may say this is the downside of life and it may make us feel inferior, but by realizing your ignorance, there is an upside, because then we begin to know where is our weakness and where do we strengthen ourselves and how do we grow and step out of this. And that is how we gain true wisdom. And that is why humility is the key that our forefathers always emphasized. And it is true wisdom that you are able to see how we must reconcile with others and with nature. It is for this reason that our justice system was always centered on restoring harmony in the community and also our obligations towards nature, our land, and so on. No? And it is only through integrity, the third point, that we can embody and uphold the moral order that the community and prevent corruption from seeping in. Therefore, leadership and selfhood were about integrity and responsibility for maintaining peace and harmony. Therefore, there was an embodiment of such an awareness and belief that was acted out by them, which gave social and political stability. Otherwise, it would be like a ship without its sail in an open ocean. And you think about it, you can try it. Well, you may say, I have the whole ocean, and you start drifting, singing the song of John Lennon or something. Imagine no heaven or hell, no country or religion. And you can see whether the world becomes one or not. Or does it disintegrate? Or you think of corruption today that we're facing. You think of the story of Noah. Corruption was prevailing, and if you don't know how to pay a bribe to the official or to the politician to get certain things done, you become the laughing stock. So your banks are not stacked up properly, it is not made well, the walls are weak and so on, and when the flood comes, it destroys you. You have no protection, you see. And so look at the crisis that we are in today. So the crisis is in, and when corruption is one of the cause to it, how do we rise above it? We have no means. Now, I think my time is almost up, but I just want to make a short point here, that this political negotiation that we're going through today is also about reconciliation. We often hear of people saying that the time has changed, so have Nagas. That the Nagas are making friends with Indians, going out there singing songs together, being YouTube bloggers together, and so on. This is a legitimate question, but we also must ask this question to the Indians. Have they changed? Have both of us changed on both sides that we are ready to reconcile? You see, does it mean that the Constitution of India is going to be or can be the source of the free institutions that the Nagas are dreaming of? No. Politically speaking, India has hardly changed. The Constitution was framed with an understanding of state sovereignty of the decolonization period, in which sovereignty meant a superstructure that controls everything else. The architecture of the Constitution is framed with several flaws. No? For example, they talk about unity in diversity, but there is no social political space for these linguistic groups to flourish, and the approach is all about homogenization and occupation. The principle of federalism is not applied. It has never been debated since the Nehruvian time. And there is dictatorial characters inherently present in its political and administrative institutions, such as in the party system, civil administration, and powers of the constitutional heads, as like we have seen with the recent issues that has emerged in Nagaland with reference to the governor in Nagaland. No? So all these kinds of troubles that are there, and therefore can we reconcile? That is the question. Because for us, reconciliation would also mean that the constitutional morality of the Indian Constitution must be reformed. You know? So, and this can be done because Constitution is not the source of rights, but it is the consequence of the rights of the individuals and the moral order. And the question that the Nagas also must ask ourselves is whether we as a people is ripe for free institutions as our ancestors did. Now, if so, then the sovereign individuals must be the architect of the Constitution that we are talking about today. So it cannot be devoid of the people. You know? And I believe that this is the story, the Naga story in indigenous movement, and should be the story of indigenous movement in the global order in the future to come, so that we are contributing with a vision and we are approaching in a way that we want to reconcile. and build this reconciliation throughout the world, and that is our message, globally speaking. And that is, I believe, is the mission and the vision and the story of the indigenous movement as a Naga as well. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gam. I think you have given us good food for thought for all of us. And now we will open it for discussion. So maybe we can have the discussion through an interactive session, through questionings and others. So it's now, I open the floor to the House. Questions have come here. It is from Ashish Kothari to everyone. How united are the various Naga tribes on this kind of vision? How united are the various Naga tribes on this kind of vision? Yeah.
Should I take it on, Doctor? Or
Yeah. Please, Gam, you can just take it on. Thing.
Chair, should I respond to that?
Yeah, please, if you can respond to that, it'll be good. Yes.
We lost him.
Hello.
We lost him. Hopefully he'll join back.
Okay, so then shall I ask to Ghazali? There's a question here. Ghazali, could you help understand the tension between self-identification and recognition by others? This is from Ningri Chon.
Thank you so much for the question. I'll try to give an answer by giving you an example of the tension. It is mostly because, for example, in the negotiations on climate change, for example, I was a lead negotiator for the local communities and Indigenous Peoples platform on traditional knowledge. And so we were Indigenous Peoples on one side, not on one side, at the table, and states were at the table. And at first, it was the misunderstanding that states had about Indigenous peoples or Indigenous populations or Indigenous communities or Indigenous groups. So that already is a problem because if you talk about Indigenous communities like or groups, like communities and groups are not reflected in the UN Charter. We're not talking about the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Communities or the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Groups. We're talking about Indigenous peoples. Peoples have rights because that's what the right to self-determination is referred to in the UN Charter, in the Article 3 of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So for that already is a tension, is the misunderstanding that they have to talk about peoples and not about communities and about groups or people or populations. Just to give you an idea, the first meeting, UN meeting was, well, there's several meetings, but like the longest meeting was the Working Group on Indigenous Populations in Geneva. It was from approximately 1986 until 2005 or 6. And it was called the Working Group on Indigenous Populations in the United Nations because the UN did not recognize us yet as peoples. And so populations like animal population, And so it was a hard fight for us, for Indigenous peoples. Like Gam already alluded to it, like a decades of fight to change from populations to peoples, because once we were peoples, we had rights. We can also be accounted under the UN Charter, as it starts with "We the peoples." So that is one of the tensions that we have experienced, that having to continuously educate people, states, representatives, and other parties that we have to deal with, about that we are rights holders. We're not stakeholders, we are rights holders. We are rights holders to our own lands. And we have, the funny thing is, and the chairman already said it before, after my introduction, that we were here before the political nations. Indigenous peoples were here before. Something like the right to self-determination, we didn't call it rights. It was just ethics to us. It was natural. It was goes without saying. The only thing is that now we have to codify it and try to move it into under the right to self-determination. And so that was that's the fight that we have that we have to continuously fight. The self-identification versus recognition is that self-identification is built on self-determination, and yeah, self-determination is to many states right now, not something that they would like to entertain dialogues or in decision making, because self-identification, it gives the right back actually to Indigenous peoples to say, like, all right, who do you want to be, and what do you want to do, and who do you want to, and what do you want to say. The thing is with the recognition by others is that you have to continuously, and maybe it's not, I would not use the word tension, because like one leads to the other. If you keep if the Naga people keep going to the United Nations, for example, or to the regional intergovernmental meeting, or to any other meeting, and you keep identifying yourself as a Naga, but if you keep on doing that, like, recognition will come naturally, because you will only identify yourself as a Naga and not as a person from India. So if you keep on, persistence is key in this one. Persistence and patience. Like, nothing that will be everlasting comes overnight. So you have to keep on persisting and like identifying yourself as a Naga in every meeting. Keep persisting your rights, preserving and having the patience that it will come at some point. So, and this is something that a Naga, that I would advise the Naga people respectfully, is to have like tremendous patience at like achieving the national aspiration, but on a, I would say, like on a daily basis, work as hard as possible to keep to keep claiming your right to self-determination, to keep speaking your language, and keep working towards that big goal. That is so, because then recognition will be more sustainable. It is, and I think what Gam also said, and I think very much agree with it, is that for a peoples to be able to sustain themselves as a peoples, now you have to act sovereign now. You have to be self-determined now, self-identify yourself as Naga right now. Like, you cannot wait until the point that you are actually independent, because like, you have to shape the nation that you want to live in right now, build on your own Naga heritage, of course. And that is what I think about when you ask a question like what the tension is between self-identification and recognition, because it starts with self-identification. Like, recognition is mostly on the basis of like what is understood, if, for example, in a UN context, like we're now currently understood as civil society, which we are not. So Indigenous peoples, the movement right now is keeping. We're staying on true to our right to self-identification, saying that we are peoples, we are self-determined peoples. So, and you see the United Nations are turning right now. They already recognize us. They're already recognizing Indigenous peoples organizations, and whereas before we could only be part of the UN or enter UN meetings as non-governmental organizations, which we're not. We're peoples. We're self-governing. We have our own civil society. So you see that it starts with self-identification. Have the patience, have the perseverance, have the discipline to keep on and doing that, and recognition will come. You will enforce recognition. That's not with will force, but it will become natural, actually, understood by others that you what you identify yourself with.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ghazali. May I now put a question to Gam? Is Gam around? Hello?
Yes, I'm around. Yes.
Oh yeah, Gam, there are two questions for you here. One is from Mr. Ashish Kothari. His question is, how united are the various Naga tribes on this kind of vision? That is one. The other question is from Paute. How important or effective will it be to build solidarity among the indigenous people in India, keeping in mind the quest for Nagas self-determination?
Yeah, okay, thank you for those very important questions. And I think it's also challenging to answer all of it in a comprehensive way. To this Ashish question, of course, this is a question that every Naga should be asking and interrogating among themselves. And I know that these questions also comes with a pinch of salt, given the reality that we may not be as united or common in our understanding of this question of the vision question that he's putting it forward. So all I can say is that, of course, we are going through a bitter moment, and the context we must realize is that it is more than 100 years now since our social and political institutions has been disrupted. And even to the extent, I would say that in the 21st century, it has also been contaminated by various factors, you know? Even for that matter, education systems or exposure or imposition of the state structures, and also in the past, this militarization, how we were not allowed to gather, and of course, coming of other religion and so on, where many things were discouraged. But the point that I am saying is that, yes, one is that culture is a structure on which we stand. It can, and you always have some negative element. This is true of every human society. Nobody can claim to be perfect. But because it has some negative element, we cannot also fully discard. Once we discard, then the question comes, can we really survive? Where is the food that we're going to put on which we are going to stand as a people? These questions are there. So it is a progression towards, yes, guided by the vision and reiteration and introspection among ourselves that help us move forward. Now, so given the reality that our institutions are in tatters because of various reasons which I described, it means that we need a lot more effort, and it cannot either be automatic. And therefore, we need that space, and we need to create that space for that kind of deliberation to bring back and to be reunited with the past. Now people will question, what do you mean by reunited with the past? You know? Does it mean going back to the olden days and being nostalgic and going back to the same way of life? No, that is not the point. The point is that whatever we can still reimagine and capture in our imagination, and that is in our memory, we can still reconstruct them. And that is the vision part that youngsters should be engaging today. Where did things go wrong? You know? And I believe that we can do this so if we are constantly engaged in this, meaning that from our ancestral wisdom, one of the things that they have always emphasized is the unity of the past, present, and the future. And I believe this is encompassing because their awareness of time is very holistic. Meaning that, for example, we still today go to the universities. Why do we go? We learn about the past, whatever authors have said, philosophers have said, and sociologists and so on, or scientists have said. It's because we need to reunite with the past. And definitely the same question for the Nagas that the youngsters should be asking is that without uniting with our past, can we move forward? You know, it is not possible. It is the consciousness of the future that we have to sacrifice, and things don't come easy. And that is why I was talking about our ignorance. How ignorant have we become? Have we become? Realizing this, we cannot think about the future, of what I will toil on, where I will put in my effort so that our people can move forward, where I will see the meaning of my life as an indigenous person. Just like when we educate our own children, we make all effort, whether we have money or not, we put in all our resources. It is back-breaking for the mother and the parents. We sacrifice because we believe that we can have a better future through our children. So it is this awareness of time that, yes, only then our vision will come. And this is something that Nagas need to be discussing, particularly the youngsters. I definitely agree with the question that this is a very valid question. And in terms of how united we are with this vision, I cannot say, but if we cannot love one another, I don't think we have the right to talk about self-determination. It makes no sense. It will end up in more fights. So this is the picture in India we saw. Without much affinity and understanding, people will just club together different nationalities through treaties. And therefore, India was naturally insecure. And the way that they were trying to bind together, in spite of this slogan that unity in diversity, what their program was focusing on was homogenization and use of force and control. And therefore, principle of federalism of these things were nothing, it was not applied. So the state was using absolute force. And from that era of Nehru, it has not been debated how to really strengthen India. I believe that Naga struggle should be looked at as an opportunity for the whole of the country to re-envision and also try to give breathe in new life and new confidence to the other peoples and the states who are also expressing a lot of dissatisfaction with the Indian state. And with the present government, of course, more and more use of power and trying to homogenize through this Hindutva ideology, fundamentalism that we're talking, that we're seeing today. So this is happening. So if the Nagas issue is more looked upon also to open up more discussions, I think it will go a long way. And that is what I mean to say, that ultimately we may see that the people of India still wants to remain united, but you may find a new formula and thereby even revisit and reform the Indian constitution. because the morality of the Indian Constitution is devoid of the people's aspiration, does not take into account the geographical vastness and cultural rootedness of the people in their lands and territories. These things are all not accounted for. No? So this to me is that I wish that Nagas and Indian intellectuals and others could discuss more. And I think that is one of the major missing elements as far as the current peace process is concerned. No? Otherwise, we will not try to find this binding force, because without that, we cannot have that vision. No? So in that sense, this is the political side, and of course we have our own facts, whether it is the other neighboring communities or the Nagas. Facts are facts, and we cannot be emotional about facts. We have to be ready when we negotiate to table the facts and look at it. And how we deal with those facts, of course, is a political moral question of how we come together and try to reconcile. No? But if we're afraid of tabling our facts, we will never move towards that kind of reconciliation and towards a better future where we're really talking about true solidarity and building this confidence and trust among the people. No? But what we are doing at the moment is that we put our emotion first and then the facts are hidden under the carpet. So we fight with emotions, and that is why it comes in the way of building solidarity and alliance in the true sense. So this is a long-term objective, no? And that is, for me, I see that that is the only way to move forward. Otherwise, this issue of solidarity, reconciliation would be very difficult. That's what I feel. Yeah, thank you.
I find that discussion has been very interactive and very fruitful, and without realizing we have far exceeded the time that was given for the discussion. So I would now like to come to the concluding part of our dialogue today by giving time to our panelists for their concluding remarks. So may I ask Ghazali to give his concluding remark, or maybe he can take 2 to 3 minutes for the concluding remark.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it's very enlightening and a very innovative and a good way of sharing thoughts, like having a global perspective, a regional perspective, and also a national, local perspective as well. So I definitely encourage these conversations happening more frequent, more in depth. Because I think that it will only the Naga people will only benefit from that, and also having being part in dialogues that are outside of the Naga context, like in a global context, for example. Or I think that, like what Gam said, I definitely want to underline and underscore what Gam said. That will only strengthen the global solidarity and global fight for right to self-determination. In terms of the final remarks, like there's nothing much that I can say other than it is self-determination is a building that you have to build brick by brick. You cannot skip any brick. You have to keep on start from the beginning and work your way to the end. There are no shortcuts. There is no and there's no model. It is very place-based. It is very contextual. What is self-determination to the Nagas can be very different from what is self-determination to other indigenous peoples. Apart from, of course, like the very root, of course, like what as enshrined in the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the UN Charter, the Twin Covenants, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of what I would like to, maybe I always like to end with a call to action, because it is more importantly to like, what do you do next? Okay, you can listen to us to hear me speak and Gam talk about in depth about self-determination. But what do you do next? And my fear is always is that like of the 100 people that are watching, only that no one and that everyone goes like logs off and then does nothing. And it's very important that you keep on thinking about it. Keep thinking about like what is self-determination to me? How does that fit into the Naga context? And how can I best exercise my rights to self-determination and making sure that I contribute to the national aspiration of the Naga people. So in a sense, my final remark would be to keep contributing to the vision that you have, that the Naga people have the national aspiration, and you don't have to go back and to revive everything that of the past. It is just making sure that you recognize it, that you build upon it, and you use that as a basis. Like what binds you look at what binds you as a Naga people, and build from that. Build your movements, build your nation up to the point where you want to go. So definitely always been very interested in following. I've been tracking the Naga movement ever since I got into the indigenous movement, as it's one of like independence movements are the most interesting ones, at least in my personal point of view. Not only because I have a personal investment in it, like I'm also our peoples are also fighting for independence, but it is about like it's finding your nation and then starting to build it so that it becomes a reality. It's trying to be creative with everything that you have. So I'm not sure if that is actually a final remark that you were looking for, but yeah, of course, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ghazali. Can I give it to Gam now, man?
Yes, okay, as the final remark, just 2 or 3 points. I think as a people struggling for self-determination, we must understand the roles and responsibilities of the self, that is myself, yourself, and so on. It's a huge task, and I think the beginning is to realize how important is that responsibility that we are shouldering. In this case, I would like to make this point clear that what is morally wrong is something that we must realize, and we must not reproduce those things. And that is why I was talking so much about reconciliation. So when we talk about reconciliation, we must not be reproducing those colonial structures and also the deep culture of social hierarchies in which we see in the Indian system, where caste system and practices has been imported, and that is a huge barrier, for example. So it is, I think, would be morally wrong for the Nagas to think about even reproducing them, because we see that it's already wrong and it is doing a lot of harm. And it is not just morally wrong for the Nagas, but it is also for the Indians, because our humanity goes beyond ourselves. We are not just struggling for our rights. If we are just struggling for our rights without thinking about the other, then we would also be racist. So we have to examine these things very seriously and examine our positions. So that issue of morality is very important when we talk about reconciliation. And that is why when we're discussing these things, we must make everyone feel the self-determination, human rights. All these things are something that permeates everything else in our life and must reach to everyone. That is for the widows, disabled, the elderly, the women, whosoever. It has to be counted. And therefore, I think it is very important that we reach out to all the schools and all the institutions that we have, even the churches and so on, as to how we can embody and shoulder this responsibility, because building up a nation and self-determination is not a small task. That is one of the point that I want to make so we should constantly examine ourselves whether the position we are taking is morally right or wrong, and whether it is democratic or not. If we don't do that, we will not even realize how our own actions are actually self-destructive to myself, to the self, and to the Nagas itself. No? Otherwise, we will not be moving towards the kind of future that we want to see. So thank you. That would be my final remark, Dr. Ngully here.
Yeah, my gratitude to the two panelists and to all the participants. I would like to bring the program to a close, but before saying so, I just wanted to say this, that our Naga story is like one big tree in the village. I mean, almost all Naga villages have a big tree where traditionally we used to hang the head of the enemy that we have taken. But our story to me appears to be like a big tree, and people just pluck a leaf from the tree and they think that they know the whole story and they go on telling. You know, that can lead to some distortion of the story. Some people may just break a branch and they try to tell the story about the whole big tree. I think unless we come to know the whole tree and the holistically approach our Naga story, it will not be complete. And therefore, I think it is this Morung Dialogue that the Naga People's Movement for Human Rights in Delhi has started. And through subsequent dialogues, I'm sure we will be able to come to find the actual tree and speak about it. I think that's what I feel. And for just want to conclude by saying that for those who speak of it, they do not know of it, and those who don't speak of it do not know of it. I think. So with these closing remarks, I would like to thank each and every one of you for the participation, and we wind up for today. Thank you so much.